So again, welcome everybody to today's session. We are covering our add-in function, the summary across trials. Just hoping going through some basics. This is part 2 of our series, I guess. There's only two sections, but it's a lot to try to fit into just 1 hour, trying to cover just the real basics of the ST program. So we're going to try to pretty much pick up where we left off. So just a quick recap of what we did last session. We really just talked about the ST criteria file is what we build in ST, and we really equated it to being a question that we're forming, or a query would be kind of a technical term. And we're really querying a set of trials, whether it's research done over the last few years on a similar set of products that you want to investigate, or maybe you have one experiment that went out to several research stations in 1 year, and you want to bring those all together to draw some conclusions. Those are kind of the two big types of uses for ST, but in general, just anytime you want to combine more than one trial together, that's really what our summary across trials is trying to do. And so to build that question, we talked through the 3 main components that you need to fill in order to get a summary and see some results. And we'll just step through those again today. So I'm going to toggle over to ST, and we'll just, in order to kind of get in the same vein here, I'm just going to start with a new criteria. So we'll kind of use this as another recap. We just, select our study definition, just the same as when you create a new protocol. We just need to choose the structure of all of the trials we want to summarize. So then the first component we needed to do is get a list of trials that we are wanting to summarize. And so by clicking on this button here, we can make a selection using the study list. Now, last time I used our tutorial study list. Makes it real easy for everyone to follow along because that same set of files is in everyone's ARM ST installation. Today, I've taken those same set of example files, but I have tweaked them just a little bit. I've thrown a little bit of more messiness, if you will, to give us some examples to work through. So you might not be able to replicate exactly what we see today just with those given files. And that's why I'm sticking here to this list. But typically you could filter down to search for the files that you want. I already kind of have them locked and loaded for us. So that number 6 in parentheses is kind of our visual cue that we have achieved a selection, which is of course what we need here as step 1. And then moving on, we are brought to the treatments editor for step number 2, which was of course the list of treatments that we wanted to work on. So we have this nice build treatments function that's just going to go through each and every trial and find a list of unique treatments that are in all of those trials. And that gives us a really good starting point for building our criteria, what we actually care about. So I'm just going to go ahead and say next. And last time it was very simple. I think we had just 4 treatments because they were the exact same in every trial. This time around, trying to make it a little bit trickier. We have something maybe a little more realistic, having some that don't quite fit as well. So this might be a little more realistic example when we get to this portion of the process, that we can't just say, hey, great, we're done, let's move to the next step. But instead we have to slow down and work on our treatments list a little more. Before I do that, just want to finish the thought process here of the third and final step, which often is kind of the trick that can go unnoticed in ST for the beginners. The last thing you'll have to do is go to the assessment data section after you have your list of treatments to create the portion of the criteria for dealing with your data columns. And so that's the third and final portion that we need. And we'll spend more time here for sure after the treatments are done. But just want to wrap up. That's really what we covered last time around. Was really hammering home the basics of those three phases. And we saw the summary a little bit, but we'll hopefully get more time today to see some of the options and things there too. All right, so back on the treatments editor, we'll spend a little time here doing some of the fixes, I guess we could call them. You know, in a perfect world, you would have close to the same list of treatments, or at least you would have the treatments that you care about entered consistently in every trial. If they all had the exact same description, then it's very easy in ST to summarize them. The computer really likes that when they're identical. It's easy to identify that they're the same and combine the data, and off we go. Of course, it's rarely that easy. And so we have some functions in ST to work through the inherent inconsistencies that can arise. So the first one we did a little bit last time. The most basic example, if I look at treatment 4 here, which is just simply the untreated, and treatment 8, it's also the untreated, but it was described as the check. You know, super simple case of clearly these are the same as far as any data that comes from either of those treatments are identical. We want those all combined together. And so all the way to the right on our editor, we have a few columns that are special to ST. And we used the equivalent treatment column, the one all the way to the right. And the way to use this, if I enter the number 4 in the cell here for treatment number 8, I am identifying that when we're combining the data, any data associated with the check should be combined with the data from treatment number 4, which of course is the untreated. So this is a very simple way to just say these two are the same. They should be combined and treated as if they were described the exact same. And so you're really just picking whichever of the two you prefer to have as the main name, the way you would want it described on the report. That's the one you would want to keep empty. So notice I don't need to put in the number 8 here. I leave the number 4 alone entirely, and I just have to designate any others that are duplicates, link back to that number 4. So you only want the one, whichever one you prefer to show up on the report. So that's the equivalent treatment. Real nice, kind of the fastest way to get something put together with the assumption that it's just different ways to describe what we actually care about. And that probably can take you a very long way as far as just dealing with any type of inconsistency or mess that you might have. Just using equivalent treatments can be kind of a brute force way to get through whatever strangeness you might have. I've got this super stomp as number 1, but number 5 is the same, but for some reason someone put a dash. So I could do the same thing and mark this as treatment 1 and be good. And then I can say, all right, well, what's wrong with number 6? And kind of do that with everything. And that definitely can work. I do have a couple of other things we can show. And so I'm going to keep the rest of these as they are, just to show some other capabilities. But I think the most basic thing, the equivalent treatments should work for a lot of situations. But going through just a couple more options we have, there are wildcards that we can use on the treatments editor as well. So last time we showed some wildcards in the assessment section. I'll go there just again real briefly because we had the asterisk and we had the @ symbol. And those were just little commands that provide instructions for ST on what to do with the information, what to do with the data. We can do something similar in the treatment section to provide some special instructions to make our treatment criteria simpler, but yet just as powerful as far as what we combine. So my first example I'll use will come from treatment 2, where I've got this stamper product and some sort of adjuvant. And treatment number 6 is really supposed to be that same one. But you'll see the key difference is I've got my stamper product name had 2 different variants to it. But in the end, they really are the same product. Or for my usage, at least, I want to combine them for whatever reason. What I can do is use the asterisk and put it at the end of the treatment name. And this becomes a begins with command. And you can see it over here on the ST properties panel. Now that I put in that asterisk at the end, we can see what we're doing, what we've given the command to ST is we want to match based on the start of the field. So now we won't take just products that specifically say stamper, but we will also take anything that begins with stamper. So this stamper 123 would also be combined here just automatically because we have this command to do so. Now I do have this second product here, the second adjuvant. So in total, this criteria will say any product that has a component that starts with stamper. You can have anything after that, whatever sequence of numbers or letters, whatever it might look like. Those all are the same as far as we are considered, as long as it also has a product with this C50220. And we are also matching on the rate, so we won't accidentally combine. If we had this product at several different rates or something, it does also have to be at this specified rate. Using this asterisk really allows us to just remove this treatment now entirely. So the nice thing here in ST that I like to reiterate, we're editing the criteria. We're changing the question. We're by no means altering the data. So if I come in here and delete this treatment, I'm only deleting it from my criteria. I'm only removing it from consideration in this one question. We're not, getting rid of data that are in our trials. So we can make whatever changes we need to this treatment list, and it's completely irrelevant to what the data is at all. And so there was a question, if you had a Stamper 1, 2, 3, and I'll just put it in here real quick. If we had Stamper 1, 2, 3, but there was no adjuvant at all, would it still be separate? And that is true. Because our criteria here for treatment 2 has both this Stamper and that adjuvant, if we had in one of our trials just the Stamper alone, it doesn't fit the criteria. It doesn't match what we've defined because we're telling ST we need these 2 components and at these 2 rates. So a product like this that might be in a treatment is not going to match. And that is kind of one of the reasons it's nice to use the build treatments, is because then we would have this treatment here in this list, the Stamper 1, 2, 3 without an adjuvant. It would be here for us to visually see, oh, hey, there is that in at least one of these trials, there's a situation where I have this product without the adjuvant. And so by knowing that, we can make sure if I want it included, I can make sure my criteria has the ability to have that included. Or not. Nope, this is definitely different, then I'll for sure just delete that treatment out of my criteria because I'm not interested in summarizing it. So great question. So that's our first wild card. It's a begins with or ends with. I think it's probably less common, but technically you could put the asterisk here beforehand, and then it's any characters before that you have Stamper, but I can't come up with. I think that would probably be pretty rare that would be necessarily useful, but it could go in either side or both, and then that would be like a contains. So that is our first wild card. There is one more that kind of fits in with what we were just talking about with that adjuvant. And so I'm going to use this sure kill example. I've got treatment 3 and treatment 6. Both have our product of sure kill, but they have slightly different adjuvants. Or, like we had just said, you could also have a case where we had the sure kill without any adjuvant as well. That could be another example. All 3 of these slightly different, but they maybe all contain the product that I'm most interested in. So what I can do, if my desire is that really I don't care what adjuvant it was, it might be something where it's just the local standard. And so in different locations, the trialist might use something a little bit different, but as long as it's the local standard of whatever is done in that area, I don't care. The name itself doesn't matter to me. What matters is my product. And as long as my product at that same rate is applied, I really want to combine all of that together. Those really are equivalent for me when I want to summarize. So this 3 and this 6, and even this 8, they're all the same to me. Obviously, we can manually use our equivalent treatments. That's always an option. But we have a wild card, which is 2 asterisks next to each other. And specifically, just those two in the treatment name field. So when we do that, along with whatever main product that we care about, this combination tells ST, as long as a treatment listing has sure kill at 2 liters per hectare, combine anything together that has that product. Doesn't matter what other components there are with that product. I want them all combined together. So again, that's the double asterisk here. And you can see over on the ST properties, it kind of toggles this option for all treatments that contain this criteria. So any treatment that contains sure kill at 2 liters per hectare should be combined together. And so by using this line here, really 3 and 6 are irrelevant. Those will all get combined into this one treatment criteria. So I'm just going to delete that one and this one out, since we've got it covered in what is now treatment number 6. So that's a good way to work around those situations where the other components just makes it messier, but in reality, I don't care. We don't care what that other component might be. We want them all combined. So that's really the second of 2. I think those are the main 2 wildcards that come up common enough. A question here about reordering the treatments. It is definitely valid to reorder these. We're by no means limited to having to have the same order as in the trials or what have you. I think there are some options here in the right click to sort by, or I could manually arrange these. So like I said, if we wanted the untreated at the top, I could make that treatment 1, and then I'll just make super stomp treatment 2. And then, this will kind of cascade down. But you do need to be a little careful with that. You can see I kind of have to go everything now. It has to cascade down. So it might be easier. Kind of depends probably on if you want it sorted logically or just rearranged. And actually, if we have an option, because I feel like that renumbering, the very first time I changed it, it like sorted and moved things, and that made it really hard. Don't recall if we have an option to maybe not. Maybe don't rearrange right away. I'm not seeing one right offhand. I could do a little digging to see if I come up with that or not. But yeah, in theory, we could do that, and then no, I think renumber is going to do what the opposite is. I bet it's going to undo what I just did because of the order here. It definitely makes sense, though, that you'd want to put those in the order you kind of might like. Let's just find out the renumber, see what happens. Yeah, that just changed the numbers based on the positioning. So, I mean, I could cut and paste. That might be a bit of a pain. There's a question if we have to delete the combined treatments. So, this latest example where we hand wrote a criteria here to combine our sure kill. Something like this, you'd probably want to delete them because those other ones that had the sure kill, otherwise you're going to pull in the same data points into different treatments. So having that duplicate is going to be a mess, and you're not going to get a good comparison because your grand means and all the statistics you do is going to be a mess because you have that treatment going into multiple spots. So you do really want to delete ones that you have kind of rewritten. But the difference is, you'll notice I still have the untreated and the check around. So if you are using the equivalent treatment function, then you don't delete them because you need kind of both references. ST needs to know to search for both untreated and a check, and then the instructions on combining them are still there. So if you're using equivalent treatments, your list is going to stay the same. It's going to stay the same length. If you do kind of go into your list and try to manipulate and use wildcards, then you would delete the treatments that you're trying to replace with those wildcards. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you are reordering, you'll notice ST should keep track of that as you renumbered, but it's a good point. You probably want to make sure after you've rearranged that your linkage is still there. So in this case, ST did not keep up with that. And it probably was because we just changed the treatment numbers instead of renumbering. So I feel like I'm leading people astray with that recommendation because by changing the treatment number, then ST doesn't know what we're doing. And I think that's probably why we lost that linkage. Great catch there. I didn't even notice that we were pointing to treatment 3 still, which was wrong. So if we were using ST to renumber or to sort, then ST knows where things are moving to, and it can keep up with the equivalent treatments. But when I was just changing treatment numbers, I think that's probably where we got our equivalent treatments wrong. So yeah, there's probably got to be a better way to change the order of these. I don't know if we have a generic. You can insert treatments and delete treatments, but there isn't like a move treatments. Oops, I wasn't trying to do that. Yeah, that's a good homework assignment for me to find out what's better ways. I'm jotting that down here. How to really renumber our treatments in ST. Because yeah, I at this point now I kind of officially retract my recommendation, just changing the treatment number, because that's definitely going to make a mess if you've done equivalent treatments. So I do have one more trick, which maybe almost ties in with this as an alternative to kind of fix the renumbering, I guess, if I think about it. One trick I've seen done before, kind of along the lines of your equivalent treatments and making your list nice, is sometimes maybe you have a certain desired clean way to describe your treatment. Like, okay, yeah, the trials in the last 3-4 years, we went through experimental names. People have done it differently and weird, whatever. It's making a mess in this list. But now, as it is, or as I want to write up, make my graphs or whatever, I have a nice, clear way I want to describe it. I'm just going to say, maybe it's super stomp 3000. Maybe that's okay. When we going commercial with this thing, that's what they want to call it for whatever reason. So this is what I want on my graphs and whatnot. You can always, create a new treatment. So I've created a treatment 7. I can describe this exactly the way I want it to look like on the reports. Of course, I probably need my rate details here. And then I can pull and combine my other examples. So like my 1 and 4, whatever ones all match this, new one I'm creating, I can then just go ahead and use the equivalent treatments. And the nice thing then is I kind of get full control over just what is this going to look like. And then I can go through my list and just equivalent treatments through them all. So that's another trick to use, and maybe would be a way to kind of help shape if you did that for all of your treatments. That'd be a way to choose the order as you go. I just insert my new treatments, and maybe in your case, maybe we'd want to insert them at the top. I'll insert my 5 that I want, fill them in the way I want, and then just equivalent treatments, everything underneath that was built into that nice, neat list that I want to have used in my summary. So that'd be one more example of something we can do here in our criteria. So real quick, I just want to look at the summary. So I'm going to just throw something real simple here. I should be picking from my list. Let's just grab yield. And literally everything else we can clear out for the moment. I really don't care what the data is itself. I just want to show, now that we have our treatments, the summary of them. And then we'll dive into some assessment examples. So kind of ignore the data, it's kind of a mess. But we can see from our treatment list, anything that had an equivalent is empty. So no data went into this box, essentially. The untreated has 18 data points. Our stamper, we don't care about what comes after stamper, has 18. Super stomp, again, is empty. The check is empty because everything went towards untreated. And so then we have the sure kill. We don't care what adjuvant was there, had 18, and then our super stomp 3000 had the 18. So that's what will happen. These are still here because we needed to use them as instructions of where to put the data. But there is an option to hide. I think it might be on this tab. I'm looking to hide the equivalent ones. Maybe it is on the format. There we go. So under the treatment section here on our format options, you can drop the equivalent treatments from summary. Maybe drop isn't the right verb there. It's really just hide them. So if I turn that on, all of those ones just aren't on the summary. So just to simplify it, even though the numbers all went where they should. So it might make sense to have that option off when you first start, running the summary, seeing how everything pieced together. Once you kind of got a good grip on it, though, you can make those all hidden. So that way, when you create your report, it doesn't have all that extra junk there. All right, so that's the treatment section. I'm going to try to move a little quicker here, working on the assessment data. We did a couple examples last time around with the the data columns and trying to work back and forth. Commonly it is just a back and forth affair, if you will, with getting the data to combine the way you want. And so last time I think we worked with the yield, but let's do an example with our control ratings. I think all of these studies are like an herbicide products is what we were doing. So I'll use control. I guess I really don't care too much about the rating unit. My assumption is they should all be the same percent, but we'll just take the chance on that and see what we have. And so that's kind of one way you can start. If you're working, maybe you're pulling together 50 trials from the company's your historical data from your company, and you don't know quite as intimately what all is in each of these files. You can use ST to kind of start to understand what you have, and then slowly narrow down into the summary that you want. So this @wildcard is kind of useful for that. And again, that's just the match and separate. So anytime we come across a different pest, for example, then it's going to, oh, here, I don't want the pest type. I want the pest code as the match and separate. Anytime there's an assessment, a control assessment that's on a different pest, we want those separated to analyze, because of course we don't want to combine them all. So we can do that, and then when we run the summary, it might be a bit of a mess. We get to see kind of the expanse of all of the columns in all of our files, and then we can start to understand what we have, and then maybe what we care about, and just slowly iterate on our criteria. So I've got all these different grand mean columns, and they're all control %, but we can see the key difference is the pest code. So it looks like there's just one trial that has the AMARE, few with Cheel, et cetera, et cetera. So we can get a sense of just what kind of coverage we have. I can see how many data points are going into each of those to get a sense of all of the columns that I'm working with. So let's say, okay, of all of these, I think my first job here is to let's narrow down on the barnyard grass. So I can then cancel and go back into the pest code and just work on our barnyard grass. So if we begin summary again, this will get rid of all of those others and only summarize that one pest code for all of our control ratings. Nice and simple. What's interesting though is I have a count of 8, which means there's 8 data points going into each of these grand means, but I only have 4 of my trials matching. So I really have more than one data column from each of these trials being put in here together. A lot of times this can be helpful then to just open up another window, open up ARM, open one of these trials, and just look at the column headings to figure out, well, why am I pulling 2 together or not pulling enough of them? In this case, considering it's an herbicide study, I've got probably had to go out multiple times to gauge the control, and I bet I'm pulling in all of those timings together. And maybe I'm better off having those separated. So I could come in and use the Trt-Eval Interval. Let's separate by some sort of timing here. If I do that, what I'm going to get is a little too much separation. Okay, great. I can see where they're all coming from. One of them was 13, one was 16, 17. It's too separated because, of course, 13, 16, and 17 are all kind of the same, whereas I've got some 54, 55, that's definitely a different timing. That's telling me something different later in the season. So there's kind of two ways to tackle this. One of them it probably requires forethought in how the assessments were described. One option would be I think it's a hidden field at the moment, our rating timing. Problem with this guy, it's really nice to just put into buckets your assessments. So the idea when you're filling in your assessments, all of them that are the first timing are A1. All of them that are the second timing are A2. And so if all of these trials had those same buckets, then I could just use rating timing. I could just, in my criteria, just use A1 and be like, hey, I'm only interested in summarizing that first time we went out for the control. Problem is that that's kind of an after the fact. Boy, that would have been nice if we did it that way, but I can't open up all 50 of my trials to type in the rating timing just so I can summarize in ST. So useful for, hey, next year, maybe we should use this because it'll make my job easier in the summary. But if it's too late, kind of after the fact, you don't have that rating timing, instead of using the wildcard, there is a workflow for some of these interval fields to specify a range. So over here on your ST properties panel, there's this section called possible criteria. And I'm going to use this because I don't have that little gold box. In these, I had that gold box, but for some of the fields, we don't. But I can kind of manually build up that gold box by using the possible criteria. So this button here is a scan for criteria to build up the list of unique intervals. So I can search the 6 trials and I can match the existing entries. So it'll only show me those that have control and are barnyard grass pest. And it just reads all those trials and creates that gold box list. The list is just over here instead. And what I can do is I can select all 3 of these that really to me are the same. They're the same set. And I can define a range. So if I click on this range button, what happens then is we have everything between 13 to 17 in that interval are going to be combined together, treated the same. And now that I created this range, ARM or ST is offering to do it again. Hey, is there another range that you're interested in? And I'm going to say yes. And it's just going to bring me right back here to choose another set. So for me, then that 54, 55 is another separate entity that are all the same. So if I click on range one more time, now I can tell ST, no, I'm done. I've picked all of them that I need. And what I get is actually 2 columns now, 2 criterias, 2 different sets of instructions. I'm still looking at the control data on barnyard grass, but now I have the two separate ranges. So if I run my summary, now I have just two grand mean columns. I've combined all of them in this kind of early time frame. We get to see all of, combining all of the data with our statistics, and then we get another batch of statistics on the second round. So that's kind of the best way to deal with the timing aspect of the data. There was a question, and it's related to just this matching here and the ARM action codes. What if one of these columns in a trial had an action code for the SNK, and the next one had an action code that specified Tukey? So those action codes are very specific. Number one, those are specific to just in ARM if you're running the standardized summary. So in ST especially, we kind of have our own option as far as what test is run. So here in the main ST summary options, we run just one statistical test across them all. So you are going to get just the one test, not the individual selections. In the single trial, if you were to run the standardized summary report, but you'd have to do that in the individual trial, then you would see those different ones, but not the case in ST. These would be mean comparison letters based on just the one test that we have in the options. It will always, just in general with the criteria, the ARM action codes will ignore the fact that there's different codes. So you're not gonna find problems with matching because you have different codes. But directly answering your question, those different codes about what statistical tests to run are not utilized in ST. Good question. Okay, well, we're running a little light on time here. So let's move on to the options. We've been in here a couple of times already, so we'll go somewhat fast. There's three main sections of options specific to ST. Very classic, just like in ARM. There's 100 options on the screen, kind of overwhelming. In general, you can probably leave most of them as the default, and then if there's some sort of functionality, boy, can ST do this? Is there a way that I could see this piece of information? Then go ahead and either scan the options, or you can always use the help topic. And there's a search you can do to find whatever specific analysis or some keyword you want to find. Use the help. So just to point out the big ones, we already were here once to show the statistical choices that you can make, the test and your alpha level. You can run protected tests. So of course if you want the mean separation to occur, the test itself to run, and then there's also options to protect that. So in this case for ST, if the interaction term is significant, then maybe you don't want to run mean comparison tests because you really should investigate that interaction first. That's the idea with this option. And then just like in regular ARM, there's the option if your ANOVA p-value is not significant, then there's maybe not a reason to run the mean comparison test. The AOV analysis, of course, the best one is the advanced ST8. just if you were replicating something you did 10, 12 years ago, we still have these other methods, but the ST8 is the the most modern statistical route. It is probably worthwhile to point out the fixed effect option here. In most cases, treatment is probably the one you would use, because as a researcher, you have more control over the treatments. Like, you get to choose the formulation concentration, or you get to choose which rates you're gonna target and utilize when you're setting up the trial. So you kind of have more control over the treatments than you do the trial conditions. The soil, the weather, what moisture is going to make it there or not. Just less control over some of those conditions at the trial level compared to the treatment. So ultimately, it's kind of a question of, what is the goal here? Are you trying to generalize your summary, what conclusions you're going to draw? Are you wanting to generalize across trials? Like, hey, my SureKill product can be effective in most fields. That'd be the type of thing you'd want to do there. So that can be somewhat impactful in just the statistics kind of behind the scenes there, looking at the analysis that goes into it. The means tab, you can see there's just so many different calculations you can turn on or off on these reports, both in the grand mean column and the individual trial columns. Descriptive statistics, a lot of options there. Format, you can choose, what headers, what fields are visible or not, and whether or not you have graphs. Speaking of graphs, we didn't get to spend a whole lot of time on there, but I do want to point that out. There is the graphing function in ST. It's kind of the same tool as in ARM, but I'm just going to get the defaults for the labels. But here I do have different graph types, so I can look across the different cross sections. First, I have my treatments. So the 4 treatments I'm summarizing, I can see the box whisker there. Very consistent. Or I can toggle over to the trials. So now the 4 trials that in my summary, I can see the analysis there. And then we also have a treatment by trial interaction graph. And it must be my display settings. It's not super helpful here what you can see. I usually cheat and go into the help anyway, because we've got a example in the treatment by trial graph that talks through how to use this. There's really 2 graphs here. There's the treatment stability up top, and then there's the grouping, the cluster dendrogram. And so this help topic will kind of talk you through this one example, like how you would use it, talking through what to look at, and then like how you would make the conclusion there. So it's saying, looking at your slopes, the slopes are important. Treatment 1 is the most, treatment 4, the slope is exactly 0. It's totally horizontal, so that's perfectly stable. Of course, it's the entry to check. Treatment 1 is then the next stable. We're just looking at how horizontal it is. The less horizontal, more sloped, then means it's less stable, more sensitive. So there's things like that. Then you've got the dendrogram that's kind of trying to cluster out the trials, so you can tell which trials are similar to each other. And that's really useful with that interaction idea. You can say, well, these 3 trial locations were all the low, the low yielding trials. Maybe I'm better off summarizing just those 3 together and then coming in and summarizing these 3 together separately. Because this interaction here, you're really looking at how similar the slopes are. Because if you have a product that's very stable, like the red one here, you would say it performs pretty much the same whether you're in a low yielding or a high yielding trial. Whereas like the blue or the green, the performance is pretty low in a low yielding trial, but it does so good in a high yielding trial. So if the slopes are not, if they're all about the same, then you really don't have much interaction. Whereas if there's differences, then you got to be careful. Do you really want to combine all of this together? Or maybe you're better off doing analysis of just these high yielding trials and then separately looking at low yielding. And then your conclusions can be based on the type of trial within there. So we could have spent a half hour on that, but obviously ran out of time. But definitely, you can use that help document to help explain that graph. And I know I'm running a little long. You just can go from column to column to see these different graphs, just like you do in ARM. And then those are included in the output as well. If I preview real quickly on the screen, because I think last week I had them turned off just for speed's sake. So those graphs get generated and included right in the report for each of the grand mean columns. So that can be helpful. Okay, well, we're out of time. Certainly, if you have questions, it definitely makes more sense when you're working in ST with your own data, for sure. So feel free to reach out to us in our support box if you're working on your own data set and have some questions. But I appreciate everyone joining and the great questions today and in the last session as well. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.